Welcome everyone to this week's development recap. My name is Dominik Müller and I'm one of the level designers for Albion Online. Over the last few weeks you've heard often that we are doing a big world rework. And there were many things hinted at. For example, we talked about home bases, we talked about camps, dungeons, mob camps, altars, resource landmarks, and passages. All these things we are doing to make the world more immersive, more believable, to give it a story, to tell the characteristic of all the factions who live in this world. Today I want to talk about a few things we've recently finished, and these things would be talking about camps, dungeons and mob camps, and also the home bases. If you look at the regions we have right now in the world, they all look kind of the same. They all cater to every need you have. They have mob camps in them and dungeons. A quest giver is always there. So there's a lot of them, but they don't feel that unique. The new world we're creating has a lot less of these regions, but therefore they're a lot more unique. They get their own reason to be. A few of these clusters will have now mob camps, and a few others will only have dungeons. In these mob camps, we normally found dungeons at the end of it. So you would go through the whole mob camp, fight your way through all these mobs, and then in the end there was another dungeon where you would fight through the whole dungeon, and then at that end there would be a mini-boss or not if somebody else was faster than you. We didn't like that too much. What we want the player to experience actually is to get this feeling of actually finishing something. So after going through this mob camp, instead of a normal dungeon, you will have now a short dungeon. It's like a cherry on top after finishing and grinding through this whole place. You will immediately find your mini-boss. It will be a very nicely designed underground tiny dungeon that actually fits to the mob camp above. But we didn't want to get rid of our underground dungeons because honestly they were really cool. So what we want to do in the cases when we don't have overground mob camps, to have larger dungeons underneath the earth. They are not as linear as they used to be. They are more sandboxy. They are kind of giant where you can go left and right and up and down. And you can find many things in there. You can find mini-bosses and even bosses sometimes. These are spots where you can go with friends and have groups running around in there, not just one but many, which will even increase the PvE again and the PvP. Additionally to these changes to mob camps and dungeons, we also wanted to give the overworld, all our regions, like a bit of dash of variety more to it, and we achieved that by doing our little random camps, or camps as we are called. If you remember, we talked about them. They are small scenes where off the streets in every region, where you walk into the forest, and suddenly you see their stone circles surrounded by keeper druids, for example. We've now finished this concept, and we've created a lot of smaller scenarios which actually narrate on the characteristic of each of these factions. So where you find things, for example, in the heretics, it's kind of usual to find a small camp where you have a small bandits waiting there or talking to each other, or a small hunter camp with heretics. But within these camps, you also have the opportunity or the possibility to find something rather strange or really rare. For example, we made it an heretic ambush. You just walk through the world and suddenly you can see two large stones with like a really badly made trap in between these two stones and a few heretics giggling behind that and obviously showing you the big reward. You can see like how crazy the heretics are in this situation, how weird they are and how they try to actually lure you into this weird trap. Or for example, for the Morganas, you have your normal war camps where you can see some field bats and encounter a few soldiers. But you can also encounter a really rare camp where they're just trying to summon a demon. And yeah, I think it was already mentioned, but I want to emphasize this again. Each of these camps has the opportunity to spawn different combinations of mobs as well. One day you just might find your normal mobs, like a few soldiers and a few archers. But on the next day, in a similar camp, you might actually find an archer and his superior, like an archer boss. And killing him alone might be quite challenging, but also rewarding. With these random camps, we offer you to find your own stories, to reward exploration. We want you to go out into the world and find these special locations, to find these cool rewards. We want you to venture out there and just have these chance to make your day. The last point I want to talk about are the home bases. You all know we want to make the world more believable, more immersive. And you also know that we want to introduce things you can see on your world map. We've talked about passages and seeing big mountains and lakes. And one of the things you want to see there as well are home bases. We have so many factions in our world already. We have heretics, we have keepers, undead, and Morgana. But what we haven't had yet so far is we never showed where they come from or where their home is, hence the home bases. For example, for the undeads, we created a massive, old, lying in ruin monastery. You have to imagine each of these home bases tell their own little story and show you where these factions come from. If you look at the undeads, the story is this massive monastery lying in the middle of the massive cluster. And one day there was an attack on this monastery during the massive war in Albion. A giant spell was casted and everybody died immediately, leaving corpses behind everywhere, everything in ruin. Now, a few thousand years later, you as the player actually enter this cluster and can see the destruction. You can see how life stopped immediately. Time didn't continue from this point on. In these home bases, we cater to all your grinders out there. You will have single-player content, you have group-player content, and even raid content. The further you go from the outside to the inside of the cluster, you can go from single-player content to group to raid content. Let's try to imagine that. If you enter this region, from the outside you will see these small farms and villages where people just die doing their daily work. These are your single-player mobs. You can just go through there, see the stories, and just grind a bit. The deeper you venture into the monastery, behind the big walls, you can actually see the life that was inside of the monastery. You can see a herb garden, you can see the military camp inside of this religious building, you can see the brewery, you can see these sort of things. And in that you will have your group content. You will find your small mini-bosses, you will find your bosses within these small stories and houses. You can fight your way through all of this ruin, of this destruction. Everything is broken down and nature is coming back and trying to grow over everything. But the deeper you venture into this monastery, you can see that the nature isn't stronger than the death that was done in this particular location. You can see that nature is getting weaker and weaker and more broken down, more dark, more rotten. In the very center of our monastery, you have a cathedral, you have a graveyard, you have a crypt. And this is our raid content. Inside this raid content, you will also find two really cool things, and that's a daily boss and a weekly boss. The daily boss will obviously be there every day, but the weekly boss will be a globally announced event, so everybody will know when it will happen. This will improve the PvE and also the PvP. Guilds will gather and just run there and try to get the first shot at this raid boss. But don't fret. I mean, the world boss will not be there in only just one time zone, but it will shift over time. So one time it will be at 3 a.m., next time it will be at 2 p.m., and so on and so forth. So everybody gets a shot at this world boss. As you can see, over the last few weeks and months, we've worked dramatically onto increasing the immersiveness and the feel and the characteristic of Albion to make the open world really nice and worth exploring. And we continue to do so. In the future, we will introduce a lot more camps, more of these tiny dungeons in the mob camps. They will all be more varied and more unique. And yeah, that what I wanted to tell you today, and I wish you a good day. Thank you very much for listening.